My maid of honor was supposed to hold my bouquet on my wedding day. Instead, she was holding my fiancé in her arms the night before. I found the messages, every lie, every secret, just hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. And instead of canceling the wedding, I decided to let the ceremony go on, so I could destroy them both in front of everyone. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted most, you know the pain cuts deeper than anything else. Here on the Betrayal Diaries, we turn that pain into justice. Subscribe now, hit like, and tell me in the comments, have you ever imagined serving the perfect revenge? Now, let me take you into the day I turned heartbreak into triumph. The story begins. I woke up on the morning of my wedding with a knot in my stomach, the kind you can't untangle no matter how many deep breaths you take. My veil hung neatly on the chair, my dress steamed to perfection, and yet I sat on the cold tile of the hotel bathroom floor with my phone buzzing in my trembling hand. At first, I thought it was nerves. Butterflies before the big moment. But when I unlocked the screen and saw Sophie's name at the top of the chat, my entire body froze. Sophie, my maid of honor. My best friend since I was 5 years old. And below her name, Jason's words. Jason, my fiancé. The man waiting to marry me in just a few hours. I scrolled down, my heart pounding harder with each message. Last night was amazing. I can't believe we almost got caught. She has no idea. Don't worry. After today, she'll be too wrapped up in wedding bliss to notice a thing. You looked incredible at the dress fitting. Couldn't keep my hands off you. The words blurred as hot tears filled my eyes. My chest heaved. I pressed my palm against the tile to steady myself. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't a suspicion. This was betrayal in black and white. My fiancé and my maid of honor. The two people I trusted most. And I was hours away from pledging my life to one of them, with the other standing beside me, smiling as she handed me my bouquet. But maybe I should start at the beginning. Jason and I met 5 years ago at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends. I was balancing a flimsy paper plate piled too high when he caught my elbow. Careful, he said with a grin. Gravity's not your friend today. I laughed, embarrassed. Guess I'm not coordinated under pressure. He winked. Good thing I am. That was Jason. Charming. Confident. Always with a quick line that made you feel seen. We started dating soon after, and he quickly became woven into every part of my life. Weekend hikes, lazy Sundays on the couch, late-night talks about the future. With him, the world felt steady, like I'd finally found someone who wanted to build a life with me, brick by brick. So when he proposed in front of the fountain where we had our first date, down on one knee with a ring sparkling in the sunlight, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I whispered, tears blurring the world as people around us clapped. Sophie screamed the loudest, hugging me so tight I thought I'd burst. Finally, she shouted, "My best friend is getting married." I call maid of honor. Of course she did. Sophie had been in my life longer than anyone. We'd shared crayons in kindergarten, whispered secrets at sleepovers, cried on each other's shoulders after heartbreaks. She wasn't just a friend. She was family. I thought having her by my side at the altar was destiny. Now, the memory feels like a cruel joke. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind. Cake tastings, fittings, seating charts that made my head spin. Sophie was there through it all. She volunteered for everything, sometimes too eagerly. "I'll pick up the favors," she'd say. "I'll handle Jason's suit measurements. Don't stress, I've got it." At first, I thought it was loyalty. She'd always been the dependable one. But then came the little moments I brushed off. The way her hand lingered on Jason's arm when she laughed too hard at his jokes. The way she insisted he wear navy instead of gray, claiming it brought out his eyes. I laughed it off then. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe my best friend and my fiancé were exactly who I thought they were. But deep down, unease was already curling like smoke through the walls of my trust. The first real crack appeared 3 weeks before the wedding. Jason came home late, the scent of perfume clinging to his shirt. Not mine. Something floral and sharp. When I asked, he waved it off. Long meeting. One of the clients sprayed half a bottle of Chanel. You know how offices are. I wanted to believe him. So I did. But the gnawing in my gut didn't go away. The night before the wedding, nerves kept me awake. Sophie had insisted on staying in my hotel suite, claiming tradition, promising to help me get ready in the morning. But when I woke before dawn, her bed was empty. My phone buzzed with a message, "Be back soon. Coffee run." Something in me snapped. Almost against my will, I opened her chat with Jason. Months ago, when she was drunk, she'd accidentally synced her messages to my iPad. I'd never snooped before. But that morning, with her absence echoing through the room, I tapped. And I saw everything. The late-night rendezvous. The stolen touches at fittings. The jokes about how clueless I was. My breath came ragged, my heart clawing against my ribs. For a moment, I wanted to scream. To tear off the dress. To call the whole thing off. But then another thought cut through the chaos, cold and sharp. Not yet. If Jason and Sophie thought I was blind, if they thought they could laugh behind my back while smiling in my face, then I'd give them a show they'd never forget. I wasn't going to cancel the wedding. I wasn't going to run. I was going to walk down that aisle, look them both in the eye, and make sure everyone saw them for what they truly were. And when I was done, there wouldn't be a wedding. But there would be justice. The hours after I read those messages stretched like years. I sat at the hotel room vanity, staring at my reflection as Sophie breezed back in with coffee cups, her hair shining, her cheeks flushed from the cool morning air. "Double vanilla latte, just like you like," she chirped, setting the cup in front of me. Her voice was the same. Sweet. Familiar. But now every note sounded poisoned. I thanked her softly, forcing my lips into a smile, even though bile still clung to the back of my throat. If she noticed the tremor in my hands or the redness in my eyes, she didn't say a word. Instead, she pulled out her makeup bag and started humming as if the world hadn't shifted under my feet. And maybe that was what cut deepest, the casualness of it all. How she could betray me so thoroughly and still laugh, still sip her latte, still swipe mascara onto her lashes without a flicker of guilt. As the morning passed, family filtered in and out of the suite. My mom fussed over my hair. My aunt snapped photos of me in curlers. Sophie orchestrated it all with the skill of a director, her hands steady, her smile easy. She adjusted my veil with delicate fingers, whispering, "You're going to be the most beautiful bride." And I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing about this was funny, but because of the sheer absurdity. My best friend. My maid of honor. The woman sliding bobby pins into my hair had spent the night before with my fiancé. I wanted to scream it out loud. To rip the veil off, throw it at her feet, and shout, "I know." But instead, I let her tuck in the last pin, let her dab at my lipstick, let her hug me as the photographer snapped photos of us smiling like sisters. Because I had already made my decision. If they thought they could turn me into the fool, then I'd let them play their roles. I'd let the performance continue. And when the curtain rose at the ceremony, I'd burn their script to ash. By early afternoon, I was dressed. The white satin hugged my waist, the lace shimmered in the light. My mother cried, Sophie dabbed her eyes dramatically, and Jason's mother kissed my cheek, whispering, "Welcome to the family." I smiled politely, my insides turning. Jason texted a quick, "Can't wait to see you at the altar." The audacity. Even now, knowing what I knew, he played the role of the perfect groom. I typed back a single heart emoji, my hands trembling with fury. Let him think I was still blind. The limo ride to the venue felt like a coffin. Sophie sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, showing me memes to calm my nerves. Every flash of her manicured nails made me want to grab her wrist and hiss, "I know everything." But I didn't. I smiled faintly, nodded when appropriate, kept my gaze on the blurred scenery outside the window. Inside, though, my mind was sharpening itself into a blade. I thought of the guests gathering, the flowers lining the aisle, the officiant rehearsing the vows. I thought of Jason waiting at the altar, Sophie at my side, my family watching with hearts full of love. And I thought about the moment I'd shatter it all. We arrived at the venue, a little chapel tucked in the woods, sunlight streaming through stained glass. Guests filled the pews, their chatter buzzing like bees. Phones clicked, dresses rustled, perfume hung heavy in the air. I stood in the bridal suite, hidden from view, while Sophie adjusted my train. "Ready?" she asked, her smile radiant, her eyes shining with what I now knew was pure deceit. I nodded. "Never been more ready," I whispered. And in a way, it was true. Not ready to marry Jason, but ready to end him. The music began. The bridesmaids walked, one by one, down the aisle. Finally, it was my turn. The doors opened, and gasps rippled through the room. I stepped into the aisle, my dress glowing in the light, every eye fixed on me. Jason stood at the altar, his suit crisp, his hair perfect, his smile wide. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world. And all I could think was how many times those same lips had whispered to Sophie in the dark. My heart pounded, my palms slick against my bouquet. Step by step, I walked toward him, my mind replaying the messages like a cruel slideshow. "She has no idea. Last night was amazing. You looked gorgeous at the fitting." Each phrase tightened my grip on the flowers until the stems dug into my skin. But I kept walking. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. When I finally reached the altar, Jason took my hand. His palm was warm, steady. His smile unwavering. Sophie adjusted my train behind me, her face glowing with faux pride. The officiant began. Words about love, trust, devotion. Each syllable sliced through me like glass. But I stood tall, my heart steel beneath the satin. Because they thought this was their day. But soon, it would be mine. I remember the way the chapel smelled, wax polish and lilies, a faint trace of jasmine from someone's perfume. It should have been a scent that soothed me, that folded around the moment and made everything sacred. Instead, it felt like a stage dressing, a thin, pretty mask over a rotten set. The sunlight slanted through the stained glass and painted colored lights across the carpet, and I counted each step I had left to take before I turned the world upside down. After the ceremony rehearsal the week before, I'd almost given in to the urge to confront them, to drag the truth into the open and let it crash and burn. I imagined Jason's guilty face, Sophie's stunned silence, the shame spilling everywhere. It would have been messy and immediate and human. But my hands remembered the phone on the tile, the messages lit up like a confession. And my head remembered the cold whisper that had steadied itself then, "Not yet." There is a difference between breaking because you must and breaking because you want them to see you unbreakable. So I made a plan. It wasn't theatrical at first. It was methodical, detailed, practical. Revenge, I decided, would not be a fit of fury. It would be an act of careful arithmetic, 1 part evidence, 2 parts timing, 3 parts spectacle. I started with proof. In the hotel suite, I sat on the edge of the bed with the safety of the dress draped over the chair and pulled every conversation I could into one place. Screenshots, dates, timestamps. I printed the messages, all of them in black and white. I printed the text Sophie sent about last night, Jason's casual, misogynistic little jokes calling me bridezoned while they celebrated. I included the blithe line about, after today she'll be too wrapped up to notice. I printed receipts, too. Photos from his phone that showed him in restaurants that matched the dates of the texts. A credit card payment to a hotel that was not ours. Every little breadcrumb that built the path from their words to their deeds. Holding those printed sheets was an odd kind of intimacy. I had their private language in my hands. The sentences that had been whispered into pillows and typed behind locked screens were no longer secret. They were now evidence. The rage I felt shifted from an animal, scrambling hurt to a precise, surgical thing. I felt clear. Next, I called the people who would make the moment irreversible. I didn't tell freelancers anything more than I needed to. The photographer? I reached out to her 3 weeks ago and told her I might need some unconventional shots at the ceremony and asked if she could make sure all reactions were filmed, close-ups included. She laughed softly but agreed, promising to get extra batteries. The videographer, he was the one who would capture the audio too. I emailed him a note, "Please make sure audio levels are high during the vows." To the DJ, I sent a short message asking him to hold one specific track after the officiant's final words, nothing more than a cue, a subtle chord, like a blank that would give me time and attention. I didn't want anything too showy. This was not about theatrics for the sake of spectacle. It was about control of the moment, making the room still long enough for the truth to land. Then there was the officiant. Reverend Mark was a gentle, elderly man with eyes like warm tea. He was also, mercifully, reasonable. I cornered him in the church lobby 3 days before the wedding and lowered my voice until it was a conspiratorial hum. "Reverend," I said, "if at any point I stop and ask for silence, will you give it to me?" He blinked. "Of course, Emily." "Why?" I almost laughed. "Why?" "Because I'm not marrying the man you think I am," I wanted to say. "Because I am about to read the transcript of someone's betrayal in front of our whole community." But instead I said, "Just trust me." He nodded, but I saw concern in his face. That was fine. Concern would be better than ignorance for him. I also sent copies of the evidence to my mother and to my sister Anna. People whose shock could be raw and who would back me up when I needed faces in the crowd that knew. That was a safety net and a signal. If anything happened to me that didn't look right, these people would stand for the truth publicly. I didn't want to make threats or demands. I wanted practical allies. Then I practiced. Not vows, those I could not fake and would never fake, but the moment I would speak. I sat in the hotel room at night, the city asleep below the window, and read the messages out loud as if they were part of a script, watching how my voice rose and fell, how the cadence sharpened. I needed the room to hear every syllable. The casualness, the laughter, the disdain. How they referred to me like a side prop. How they joked about getting away with it. I wanted the rhythm of those messages to land like knuckles on a table. Sleep came in fits. The physical symptoms of betrayal were vivid, the way my stomach looped with the memory of his smile, the dry, brittle taste behind my teeth, the sleepless, white vision panic at 3 in the morning. I woke with my heart racing, palms damp, and sometimes convinced I'd lost my voice. At other times I lay still and let the silence be heavy, rehearsing the faces that would be there. My parents, Jason's parents, Sophie's family, colleagues, friends. The weight of it all was a pressure that only made the plan more important. People asked if I was okay. I was, in the way that a watch can keep precise time while its internals are half shattered. I was functionally composed. I could smile for photos. I could write thank you notes. I could sign the programs. I could even talk to Sophie without letting the tremor in my voice betray the volcano underneath. In public, I wore the mask well. In private, I sharpened the instruments. One of the hardest parts was seeing Sophie smile at me, talking about colors and favors, as if nothing at all had happened. She'd braid my hair and tell me a story about kindergarten, and I let her because with each small sly move she made, leaning in toward Jason on the couch, catching his eye across the room, she also gave me time to prepare something stronger than a fight born of pain. It is strange. The very people who teach you to love can also teach you how to weaponize their own habits against them. There were moments of doubt, surges of childish longing where I imagined calling the whole thing off, running barefoot out of the chapel and screaming a single name until he came and begged. But that was his victory, chaos and spectacle that left me diminished. I wanted spectacle only if it restored me, not if it humiliated me. So I stayed quiet, collected my proof, and planned a public unmasking that would make sense to everyone there, not just an angry bride's tirade, but a clear, undeniable presentation of betrayal. To make sure the truth could not be dismissed easily as spiteful or misread later as drama, I added layers. A written statement would be given to the church administrator at the same time I rose to speak. This would be filed and time-stamped. A small stack of the printed messages would be distributed in sealed envelopes to my mother and sister, in case the audio failed or in case anyone tried to gaslight the moment by saying the words were taken out of context. And I engaged one quiet friend, Lena, who had always been a level-headed presence, and asked her to stand up immediately after I finished and say one thing. I saw them together at the courthouse restaurant 3 times last month. She agreed, hesitant but loyal. If anything, her steadiness would ground the emotional avalanche I intended to unleash. I had also decided to weaponize decorum. At the altar, I would not raise my voice. I would not weep theatrically or throw myself to the floor. Instead, I would read, in a clear voice, the messages and the receipts, formatted like a lawyer laying out a case. The cadence would be deliberate, quote, Pause, quote, pause. The room would have no chance to assume this was a young woman's melodrama because the format would be factual, bureaucratic almost. Facts are hard to refute. Packing the folder the night before was a small ritual. I placed the photographs face down, the printed messages in the middle, the receipts attached with neat paper clips. I slipped a small recorder into the fold of my bouquet. If voices in the room tried to muffle me, the recorded sound would prove I had spoken in the chapel. I tucked a short note into my garter, a letter I had written to myself months ago, about what marriage should mean as a small talisman. I wanted to stand in the ruins of their betrayal with the person I had been before any of this, a reminder of my own value. The morning of the wedding, acting was almost second nature. People fussed, flutters of laughter and tears, hairpins clicked. My mother kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're brave." My father squeezed my hand with an intensity that made my knees buzz. The photographer moved about like a benevolent hawk. The officiant murmured his lines and adjusted his glasses, and I mouthed the words I would say when the time came, feeling them like keys in my mouth. I left no sign I was anything but the bride. I loved the shine of the pearls at my neckline, the exact fold of my veil. I smiled at the littlest guests, let a child tug my train with no reprimand. Sophie pressed my hand, warm, familiar, traitorous. "They'll gasp when they see you," she said, and I thought, yes, they will. Between the last reading and the vows, the air thickened. The organ swelled, the notes pressing against my ribs. Reverend Mark gave a soft homily about love and commitment, and the congregation hung on the sacred words. The world narrowed to two people at the front of the room, him and me. He looked at me like a man seeing his future, bright and untroubled. My chest filled with a cold that had nothing to do with the stained glass light. As Reverend Mark asked if anyone objected, the customary silence washing over the chapel, I felt the small tape recorder in the fold of my bouquet, a tiny weight that steadied me. I listened for the hum of a camera, the creak of a shoe. My hands were steady. It surprised me. I had expected some internal collapse or a tremor, but everything in me had congealed into the one sharp purpose of the next moment. When the officiant finished speaking about vows and the sanctity of truth, I folded my fingers around the bouquet until my knuckles whitened. I stepped forward because I knew I must. Walking up the aisle meant acting under their eyes. Standing on the altar meant their shame would be public. There is a ruthlessness to that, to make someone account for their actions in front of witnesses. That's the justice that cannot easily be denied. Then I paused, and the silence sharpened. Jason's smile flickered like a candle in a draft. Sophie's hand tightened on my train in a subtle, practiced motion, a gesture of someone pretending support. Reverend Mark looked at me with concern and said, "Emily." I'd written the words I would say down in my notebook. I had rehearsed them until they felt like breath. I drew a breath and spoke slowly, deliberately, each syllable measured. "I cannot recite vows today." A rustle through the pews, the flutter of cameras, a gasp like a hand slapped across the face of the room. I could feel eyes recalibrating on me as if trying to figure out a new equation. It's not because I do not care about love, it is because I care about honor. I will not bind myself to a man who betrays me. I will not step forward while the people who are asked to support me are complicit in deception. My voice did not climb into the theater of hysteria. It stayed low, steady, clinical. The point was not to create theater, it was to present the case. And then, the cliffhanger, the exact instant before I reached into the folder and started to read the messages aloud, the organist's hands froze in mid-phrase and every person in that small chapel leaned forward, the air suspended. I opened the folder. My finger brushed the top page. Time seemed to hold its breath. Behind the hush came the soft, ridiculous sound of my own heart, a drumbeat in the silence, and I started to read. The first page trembled only slightly in my hands. My voice did not. "This," I said, holding the paper just high enough for the guests to see, "is a message my fiancé sent to my maid of honor at 2 a.m. this morning." I read aloud. "Last night was amazing. I can't believe we almost got caught. She has no idea." A ripple passed through the room, sharp intakes of breath, whispers like leaves scattering in wind. I didn't look at Jason. Not yet. I turned to the next page. Don't worry. After today, she'll be too wrapped up in wedding bliss to suspect a thing. You looked gorgeous at the fitting. Couldn't keep my hands off you. Gasps now, louder, almost choked. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Sophie pale, her lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came. Jason shifted, his smile shattering, his jaw tightening like he might lunge forward. I kept reading. You make me feel alive, Sophie. It's like the wedding is just the cover for what we really have. The words echoed against the chapel walls. They didn't sound like mine, they sounded like a judge's sentence. I lowered the page slowly, then let it drop to the floor. The next one followed. And the next. Photographs. Receipts. More texts. A hotel charge for two, the night Jason told me he was working late. Sophie's selfie, the very same day she'd been shopping for bridesmaid accessories. Each page fluttered to the carpet like a feather and landed with the weight of a stone. The silence grew thicker, heavier, broken only by the occasional gasp. A child in the back whimpered, hushed quickly by her mother. I finally turned my head. Jason's face was crimson, his eyes starting, desperate. "Emily," he started, voice cracking. This isn't what it looks like." The laugh that burst from me was raw, sharp. "Oh, Jason. For once, it's exactly what it looks like." Gasps again. Sophie stepped forward, hand trembling against my train. Please, it was." "Don't," I snapped, whipping my head toward her. My voice cut like glass. "Don't you dare say my name with that mouth. Not here. Not now." She recoiled, her eyes wet, mascara threatening to run. The officiant's voice broke the silence, shaky but firm. Perhaps we should take a moment." "No," I interrupted, raising my voice just enough to cut through the murmurs. "We don't need a moment. We need truth. And the truth is this. The man standing at that altar is not the man I fell in love with. He's a liar who thought he could have it both ways. And the woman who should have been my sister is a traitor who thought her loyalty was for sale." Murmurs surged again, this time sharper. Jason's parents bowed their heads. My mother's eyes brimmed with tears, my sister's face fierce with vindication. I looked around the room, locking eyes with the crowd. I will not marry him. I will not bind myself to betrayal dressed up as love. And I will not stand here pretending this is anything but what it is, a performance they scripted, expecting me to play the fool. Jason's mask cracked completely then. He reached for my wrist, desperation flaring. "Emily, listen to me." I jerked back, my bouquet shaking as I held it between us. "Don't touch me." Sophie's face crumpled, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, so you only meant to betray me halfway? How generous." The room erupted with scattered chuckles, nervous and sharp. Even in betrayal, people can't help but relish honesty when it cuts clean. Then I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and spoke the words I had rehearsed in the stillness of sleepless nights. Today was supposed to be the best day of my life. Instead, it is the day I take my life back. I will not walk down this aisle as a victim. I will walk out of here as someone who knows her worth, someone who refuses to be bound to lies. Silence. Heavy. Reverent. And then applause. It started with Lena, my steady friend, clapping once, twice, firm. Then my sister. Then my aunt. And suddenly the chapel was filled with the sound of hands striking, the sound of approval, of release, of truth echoing back to me. Jason stood frozen, horror etched across his face. Sophie's tears streaked black rivers down her cheeks. And me? I stood taller than I ever had before. I stepped back from the altar, handed the bouquet to my mother, and let the folder of evidence fall to the floor at Jason's polished shoes. "Pick that up, Jason," I said coldly. "It's yours now. All of it." He didn't move. So I turned, gathered my train in my hands, and walked down the aisle. Not to him. Not with Sophie at my side. But alone. And as the doors swung shut behind me, the sunlight hit my face, warm and clean, and for the first time in months, I felt free. The reception never happened. The guests dispersed in a storm of whispers and texts, some furious, some gleeful. By that evening, screenshots of the evidence had spread through our entire circle. The story was out. Jason tried to call me 20 times. I blocked him. Sophie showed up at my door 2 days later, mascara still crusted under her eyes. I didn't open it. She left a letter in which she called it a mistake. I burned it in my sink. Because betrayal is not a mistake. It's a choice. And my choice was to never let them close again. Weeks later, when the silence finally settled and I could hear my own thoughts without the echo of rage, I realized something. The revenge wasn't in the evidence. It wasn't in the gasps or the shame or even the applause. The revenge was in the way I walked out, head high, veil trailing behind me like a banner, and claimed myself. They thought they'd broken me. But I was never stronger than in that moment. And that strength was mine. Forever. When I look back now, I don't see a ruined wedding. I see a beginning. For weeks after that day, people whispered. Some pitied me, some admired me, some called me brave. I didn't care what label they gave. Because the truth was, for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's weight but my own. Yes, it hurt. Betrayal always does. It slices into the tender parts of your heart, the ones that trust blindly, that love without question. It makes you doubt yourself, your worth, your judgment, even your sanity. But here's what betrayal also does. It reveals. It shows you who people truly are when they think you aren't looking. Jason thought I'd never question his late nights, his excuses. Sophie thought I'd never notice her lingering looks, her too tight grip on the details of my wedding. They underestimated me. And when people underestimate you, the sweetest revenge isn't just proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt slowly. I went to therapy, cried into my pillow, threw away the wedding magazines I once kept stacked on the counter. But I also started to laugh again. I went out with friends who reminded me who I was before Jason, before Sophie. I learned to enjoy silence without suspicion, mornings without dread. I remembered the Emily who loved fiercely, trusted deeply, and I promised her I'd never silence her again for the sake of people who didn't deserve her. The wedding was supposed to be about forever. Instead, it became about freedom. And I will always choose freedom over lies. To anyone listening who's been betrayed, I know the ache you carry. I know how the nights stretch long and the questions circle like vultures. Why me? How could they? What did I miss? But hear this, betrayal is not the end of your story. It's the moment you pick up the pen and write yourself stronger, wiser, sharper. And sometimes, yes, it's the moment you stand in front of a room full of people, rip off the mask of someone else's deceit, and walk away with your head held high. That day, Jason and Sophie lost me. But I found myself. And that, more than anything, was the revenge. If you've ever tasted betrayal, you know how deep it cuts. But you also know the power of rising above it. Tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or imagined? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Betrayal Diaries, where lies are exposed, justice is delivered, and the sweetest revenge is always told. Until next time, remember, betrayal might break you for a moment, but it can also set you free.